and welcome to Precision Planting Winter Conference 2023. It is so great to have you here today as we bring growers from across the country and across the world together at 22 locations across North America. This is one of our favorite days each and every year at Precision Planting, as we get the opportunity to interact with you, our customer. We get the opportunity to talk about research that we've been working on over the last year, and we get to mix in a few product announcements along the way. Now, Winter Conference 2023 marks the 30th year of Precision Planting, and as I was preparing this presentation, I spent some time thinking, what should we do to commemorate 30 years of Precision Planting history? You know, a lot of organizations, when they get to an anniversary, they'll talk about all the successes they've had across their history. Or they'll talk about all the products that they've launched across their history. But we're not going to do that today. What we're going to do today is we're going to talk about our failures. We're going to talk about projects that we've worked on over the last 30 years that we were passionate about, that we were invested in, that we were bringing to market, but something happened. Something wasn't right. The right thing for us to do was to stop the project. Now you may ask me, Justin, why in front of God and country would you talk about Precision Planting's failures? Well, there's two reasons. The first is, who doesn't love a good story about a train wreck, right? But second is, it is not the successes in our history that have led us to get better. It is not the successes in our history that have challenged us to improve. It has been these projects that we've invested in and been passionate about that ultimately had to come to an end. It's been in the failure, it's been in the mud of trial that we have been forced to challenge the status quo, that we have been forced to think differently about a problem. Now, before I get into these projects, I want to spend just a moment talking about how it is that we measure success and failure in the projects that we work on. The first principle for us as we're designing a product is that we want to remove the guesswork from your operation. Depending on which pass you're in, you may be putting down hundreds or thousands of dollars of input costs each and every minute. And the difference between knowing and not knowing that it's going down properly can be the difference between a profitable acre on the farm this year and an IRS hobby acre on the farm this year. And so our passion is to put eyes on your equipment, eyes in your operation that give you visibility to the yield-robbing occurrences that happen on your equipment and your operation. So that as you finish your pass and you put the equipment back in the shed, you don't have the fingers crossed hoping that your input dollar was well invested. You can have the confidence that the plan that you laid out was executed and that you've given yourself the best potential for profitability this year. The second lens that we use, the second passion that we have in product development is that we want to develop products that earn their place on your farm. We want to work on concepts that either are increasing the yield on your operation or they're looking at ways to improve the investment of your input dollar, improve the ROI of your input dollar. Because if we focus on those things, what we believe we can do is we believe we can design products that can pay for themselves on your operation in less than 2 years. And so what we're constantly looking to do is to understand the agronomy, how you spend the input dollars on your operation, and then ultimately the technology that we're working on. Ultimately because we want to aim for the center of those three circles. If we think about agronomy, for each of our projects, we run a multi-year, multi-site yield trial. Not talking about one pass or one field or 1 year, multi-year and multi-site. We want to understand the biological mechanisms that are going into the crop that are leading to increased yield. Because we need to understand the likelihood that those same mechanisms are going to transfer to your operation. We also focus on the input dollar. Now this pie chart, it might not represent exactly your operation, but across the industry over the last 2 or 3 years, this is more and more what it's looking like. In that 75% of our input dollars, non-land input dollars, are being spent on fertilizer, seed, chemical, and machinery. And so our team focuses on these 4 categories, looking for ways and opportunities to improve the ROI of these dollars. That $1 spent brings more than $1 in yield. And the last thing that we look at is the technology. Now, it may seem strange that the engineering of the actual product is the third thing that we look at, but it has to be that way. It has to be that it is with an understanding of increased yield and an understanding of improving the ROI of the input dollar that we design the product. Because if we aren't designing the product with those 2 things at the forefront of our goals, it is very possible that we could design a $10 product to solve a $1 problem. So it's with each project that we are focusing on all 3 of these aspects as we decide, should we continue the project or is it time to stop? Is it time to pull back, and is it time to pivot? So I'm going to talk about 2 projects today, 2 of our failures. Both of these projects we were passionate about, we were working on them, and ultimately the concept crashed. Now the concept crashed, but the passion for solving the problem did not crash. It survived. And what we find in both instances, that it's out of the ashes of one project that becomes the launch pad for the next project. So let's talk about some failure. We worked on a project called Project Field Sense. And we worked on it for just under 2 years with the goal of bringing the product to market in the spring of 2017. Now with each project, as we get started, we start with what we call core beliefs. These are things that we believe to be true, and we hope to prove them and to also give visibility into your operation. And so as we think about what our core beliefs were for Field Sense, the first one is a belief that we have that is pervasive in everything we do at Precision Planting, and that is that the yield potential on your farm is set by the seed genetics, the fertility program, but ultimately the placement of both. And this is something that we've talked about for years, that our belief is that the maximum yield potential you will have on your farm is when the seed is in the bag and the fertilizer is in the tote. And it is only the careful placement of both of those into your field that you can maintain as much of that yield potential as possible. It's pervasive in everything we do. We're going to talk about that all day throughout the breakouts. It's been in 30 years of our agronomic research. But the second core belief that we had with Field Sense was slightly different. And it's what each of you know. That you can do everything right on the day of planting. You can do everything right in the side dress rig, but ultimately it's the environment that sets the yield that crosses the scale at the end of the year. We're talking about rain events and GDU, moisture, temperature, wind events. We know that there's a big effect of that environment. And the third core belief for us was that for most of the year, that environment is unsupervised. For any given acre on your operation, how many minutes is someone supervising that environment? 1, 2, 3 minutes a year, maybe somebody's on a given acre. So we have a situation where an enormous impact on yield on your operation, and we have almost no visibility to it. So as we got into the project, we started the product concept. What are we going to do? What is the goal of what we're going to do? And so the way we look to solve the problem is this device that you see here in the field. It was going to be a real-time, in-field sensor that was going to give you visibility into your growing environment. Not different than the 2020, which is a real-time, in-cab device that gives you visibility onto your equipment. And so what we had done is we had integrated a rain gauge into this device, but this device was far more than a rain gauge. In fact, you would put it in the field, and it had the ability to connect wireless sensors from around the field that could measure air, soil, and the crop. all of this information was then going to come to your cell phone to give you real-time visibility into your growing environment, to allow you to make decisions in the season, like maybe a late season pass, or between seasons, like tillage practices or tiling. So it's with this concept and these beliefs that we got started developing the product. And what we learned very quickly is that to design a product that's going to sit outside on a post all year long is very different than designing a product that's going to be on a planter or a sprayer. In fact, there's a lot of things you need to consider, both animal and environmental, as you think about designing something that's going to sit outside. So as we think about this, there's an entire list of animals that are looking to make a home out of your device. And you need to figure out how you want to dissuade them from coming and living in your device. And there's an entire other list of animals that are looking to make a toilet out of your device. And you need to make sure that that doesn't happen as well. So as we also think about the environment, if we're going to live outside, we need to think about wind and temperature and pollen. There was a couple categories, a couple things that we thought of that we weren't sure if we should put it in the animal category or the environmental category. So think with me for a minute. We're going to mount a device on a post in the country, possibly next to the road. What could possibly go wrong, right? So we dive in. We're going to solve these problems. We have to go into the dark world of animal psychology. And so that's what we did. There was actually a period of time where we had a bounty in R&D for spiders. We would have engineers at home in their basement trapping spiders to bring them into R&D so that we could run experiments to see between 2 or 3 different devices which one did the spider prefer to lay her eggs in, or which one did he prefer to make a web in. Now, we weren't just running an active terrarium in R&D, we were also running an active aviary. Now, I want to be very clear, the conservation agencies do not like you live trapping wild birds, and so we did not go down that road. But what we did do is we went to the local pet store and we bought the largest bird cage that they had, and we bought all of their birds. The guy at the bird store is a little bit weirded out when you say, "I'll take all of your birds." And that's what we did. Because we needed to understand, how do you keep those little buggers out of where they want to go? And what we realized is, there is no way to keep those little buggers out of where you don't want them to go. As you think now, if you go into town on the ledge at the courthouse, now you understand why that looks like the razor wire at the max security prison. Because birds can get anywhere that they want to go. So it's with this concept and with this engineering that we went to the field. In the spring of 2016, we built 200 of these units, and we worked with growers across the country to install them and to use them. But if you remember right, only 1/3 of the bubbles in that chart was the engineering. Does the product do what we think it should do? 2/3 of the bubbles are, does the product make a difference on your operation? Does it solve a problem? Does it create an opportunity? And so included in installing 200 of these is to go out and talk to the people that are using them. Understand how they're using that information. Is it jumping off the page? Is absolutely giving insights that they otherwise wouldn't have had? What we heard in those conversations, some of them were pretty painful. Talked to growers and they said, "Well, actually, I forgot to download the app." Well, I looked at it a week ago after it rained. It seemed okay, but I really haven't thought much about it. You know, if you're an engineer and you've spent 2 years of trapping spiders to make sure that they won't live in this thing, and the customer says, "Meh," that can be a tough conversation. The one thing that did jump off the page in this conversation with growers was every time the topic came to soil nutrients. Growers were frustrated with how difficult it is to get repeatable, reliable, and timely soil nutrient information on the farm. They talked about how difficult it was because of a narrow soil sampling window in the spring or in the fall, or how expensive it is to get soil sampling information, or how difficult it is that when you get the results back, what do I do with them? Or I make a script, but how did I get from the results to the script? Because that script is an enormous check that I have to write in the fall, and if I don't understand how we're getting to that number, am I just blindly writing this check for my fall fertility? What became clear to us in these conversations is that we were not working on the right problem. We were looking at a situation where we were going to solve a $1 problem with a $10 product. And so the right thing for us to do was to stop, to step back, and to pivot. And what we did in that pivot, our passion became to understand the soil sampling industry, to go back to the drawing board and understand the soil sampling industry. And what we found is that there is very little that has changed over the last 100 years. And so we poured our passion into understanding the problems and the opportunities on the farm as it comes to soil sampling. Now, if we fast forward 6 years from this spring that we're talking about here, 2016, this last summer you probably heard, or maybe you've heard, that we announced a family of products called Radical Agronomics. Now, we're not going to talk a lot about radical agronomics today, but what I want you to understand is our goal in this project has been to streamline the process that the agronomist goes through to sample, to test, and to synthesize information. We've tried to remove as many of the manual steps as possible so that we can get to more accurate, repeatable, reliable, and timely soil sampling in the fall so you can have visibility to that return on investment of that fall fertility dollar. Now, we're going to continue to work on this project, and we will continue to work with agronomists and agronomy service companies across the globe as we look to bring radical agronomics to your farm. Now, the second project that I want to talk about today, the second project that we were passionate about but ultimately led to failure, is a project that we called the 1010. Now, based on this picture, I might not need to explain to you what we were looking to do with the 1010 project. But what I want to do is talk about what our passions were. We worked on this project for 4 years, and we were looking at bringing the 1010 product to market in the spring of 2014. Now, our core beliefs were, as we started this project, was that the 4.5-mile-an-hour speed limit on planting was a false limit. It was based off of the speed at which a seed ricochets off of a wall inside of a seed tube. And we believe that if a company had the guts and the guile to redesign the seed metering system and redesign the seed delivery system, there was the potential that we could break through that speed limit. We also believed that field conditions can change every foot. And we as an organization have been doing research and had been teaching and training for years that the planter pass is the most important pass of the year at setting the yield potential on your farm. And that each year you need to set that planter for the environment that it's about to go into. And that there, on the day of planting, it can be 1/4 of an inch difference in a setting that can be the difference between a profitable acre and a loss acre on the farm. And so the next logical step for us as an organization was to create a planter, an end-to-end solution that fulfilled these beliefs. So we got to work. We started a project of designing and building a planter from the ground up. And what we realized very quickly is this was by far the biggest project that we had ever worked on as an organization. We realized that we needed to grow, and we needed to grow very quickly. Across those 4 years of the 1010 project, the R&D organization grew from 8 engineers to 42 engineers. In the springs of 2012 and 2013, we ran multiple research planters across the U.S. that started in Texas in January, worked north until we were in Minnesota in May, covering tens of thousands of acres. This picture here was taken in 2012 by the build team of one of our research planters as we were getting ready to commission the planter, load it up on the trailer, and send it to Texas for research. You know, there's one story that still survives a decade later from this program. And that story took place in Arthur, Illinois, on the Gingrich farm. So we were running our test plots, and we pull into the Gingrich farm in Arthur, Illinois, and it is a beautiful day. It is one of those days that God made for planting corn, and we got the blessing to be able to do that. But what we realized very quickly in the morning is it was going to be a frustrating day. I'm going to let you in on a little secret here. Technology does not always work the way you hope it would. Okay, so maybe that's not as big of a secret as I wished it was. But a little secret is that when you're developing technology from the ground up, it never works the way that you think it should work. And that's how we were experiencing this today. We would get out, we would get going, we'd be clipping along at 10 miles an hour for 2 rounds, and then something would break. Have to get out of the plant, get out of the tractor, go back to the planter, get on the phone, call Tremont, get the engineer, and try to fix it. And this was all morning long. Just one round and down, one round and down. Now about midday, the neighbor pulls into his field, across the fence row. And you guys know that the only thing more frustrating than being down in your field is having an audience, right? It's having the neighbor see that you're down in your field. We took a picture, and the neighbor was pulling a John Deere 7000 6-row with a team of 6 plow horses. What played out the rest of that day is the most epic tortoise and hare race that you have ever seen. As we would come blazing down the field at 10 miles an hour, break down, and as we get out of the tractor and we're standing there working on it, what happens? Clippity-clop, 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 passes us up. Now, for some reason, the history books didn't record who won the race that day. I think you guys have a feeling. So what I wanted to do also, we got so close to launching this planter that we actually had our marketing team starting to work on the material that we would use at Winter Conference 2014. And so I went back to the vault and I pulled out one of these videos, and I wanted to share with you today what it would have looked like at the spring of 2014.
R&D whiteboards are full of ideas about the planter of the future. The sketches include things like speed and automation, narrower rows, and less compaction. Our teams are focused on solving the problems that we know are limiting our yield potential. Compaction from central fill systems, poor spacing at high speeds, sidewall compaction, poor depth consistency, and emergence. These are the issues that precision planting has solved. Here is the planter of the future. It's accurate at 10 miles per hour. It's light without being lightweight. It lends and borrows weight as needed for a light footprint with full penetration. It provides row-by-row instantaneous reaction to variable rate prescriptions and to variations in soil densities. It's the planter on your whiteboard. It's the planter farmers need to keep moving yields higher. This is a ground-up rethinking of how we plant.
Now, of course, we know today that that didn't happen. The project failed. And you know, as we look in the rearview mirror, I think it is fair to say that it is by God's grace that Precision Planting did not launch this planter in 2014. Because if you remember, in the spring of 2014, the U.S. planter market contracted by 70% as crop prices came off of their 2012 high. Even though the project did not happen, our passion for breaking the speed limit, our passion for creating a planter that can change each and every foot survived. And so what also came out of that passion was a passion and a renewed passion for the retrofit approach to bringing technology to the market, with the understanding that oftentimes the highest return on investment that you can have on your operation is to upgrade and improve the planter that you have in your shed. So what was the result of this failure? What was the end of this failure for us as Precision Planting? It was the products that have come to the market over the last 10 years. If we look at VSET and V-Drive, Delta Force, and SpeedTube, these projects came directly out of the 1010 program and into the retrofit market. And if we look at products like Smart Firmer and Smart Depth, FurrowForce, Reveal, these projects were spawned by the research and the passion that we had during those years to understand the yield robbing issues with the planters in the marketplace. As we look in the rearview mirror over the last 30 years, I'm encouraged. I'm encouraged by projects like FieldSense and the 1010 and many others that we worked on to solve a problem on your operation. But as we got into them, we realized that one of these three was not going to work, and that we were solving a problem that didn't need to be solved on your farm. And so we did the hard thing, which is to stop, step back, and pivot, and take our passion back to the drawing board. And as I look forward for the Precision Planting, I'm excited to see that we continue that same method. Today, there are a dozen projects that we are working on in R&D. All of them looking to the planter, the sprayer, nutrient management, or other parts of the crop cycle, but each and every one of them looking to find the center of this graph, looking to find an opportunity on your farm, yield opportunity, or a better investment of your ROI dollar. Our passion at Precision Planting is not technology. My hope for us as we move to the future is that we would have the boldness to continue to try to tackle the hairiest problems on your farm, but the humility that when we're talking to you and you say, meh, we would have the humility to step back and look for other opportunities. Now, today is also another anniversary. It's actually an anniversary of a product that we launched here at Precision Planting that has gone way bigger and way broader in the industry than we ever thought possible. Today is the 11th year anniversary of back in Bay 5 in R&D where Precision Planting launched FieldView. Now, if we go back as far as 2007, we at Precision brought out the 2020 monitor. And the goal of the 2020 monitor was to give you more visibility in the cab. So the industry would move from blinky lights to metrics and to warnings. And as we came into 2012, our goal was again to increase the amount of visibility that you have in the cab during the precious hours of putting the crop in the ground. This time adding the high definition map as a complement to the 2020's metrics and warnings. And so when we launched FieldView, our goal, our core beliefs was, as I said, to complement the 2020 and to bring the high definition map into the cab. The other thing we were focused on was giving a single place in your operation that all of your information can be so that it can be accessed by anybody in the farm. You know, if we think back to the early 2010s, yield monitoring was just starting to catch on, and prescriptions, we're starting to do more and more prescriptions on the farm. And it was like overnight that the amount of thumb drives on the farm exploded. There were thumb drives in the cup holder, there were thumb drives on the dash, there were thumb drives in the drawer in the office, but where was the thumb drive that you needed? Nowhere to be found, right? And so our passion was to bring to the market one place that all of the information could be so that you could access it, anybody on the farm could access it, and whomever you want could access. Over the last 11 years, it has been amazing to see how fast and how far the industry has progressed on these core beliefs. And there are things that have happened in the industry that there's no way we could have known in 2012 that they were going to happen. One is the amount of information that now moves across your farm. In many instances, over the last 10 years, the amount of information on your farm has gone up 10 or 20-fold. And if we think about the number of people in the industry that you have the opportunity to work with, to store and to analyze your information with you, the amount of partners that you can use. And what those realities, those changes in the industry have led us at Precision Planting to work on a project for the last few years, which is to modernize how the 2020 interacts with the rest of the world. Now, if we go back to 2012, if we stay in 2012 for a moment, to the moment we architected FieldView, right? The moment after we came up with the idea, you got to start laying the groundwork. You got to architect it. And so as you think about how the 2020 interacts with FieldView, there's actually two data paths that are taken out of the 2020 and into FieldView. The first one is the in-cab path, and that's what you see as the map paints there while you're planting. That's the in-cab path. There's a second path that goes from the 2020, shoots right through the iPad and goes to the cloud. And that's what you experience as you get back to the shed and you sync your iPad to your account. Now, it's beyond the scope of this conversation to get into the technical details of why there's two paths, but it is important for us all to realize for this conversation that there are two paths. Now, in 2012, if you are building a road for the first time in the middle of the woods called FieldView, you have to make a decision. How big of a road do I build? Do I build a dirt road, a gravel road, 2-lane highway, 4-lane highway, 8-lane superhighway? You have to make those decisions. And you don't just build a road by guessing how much traffic there's going to be, guessing how much cargo there's going to be. You go out and you look. And so that's what we did. We went out to the industry and we looked. How much data is there moving around on the farm? How much cargo is there? And the reality is 10 years ago, there wasn't much. Now, you don't build a bridge for exactly the amount of traffic as today. You look into the future and you say, hey, if I'm going to put the effort into building a bridge, I better build one big enough that's at least going to last for a while. And so that's what we did. We built a bridge that was not only big enough for the cargo of the day, but it was also big enough for the cargo of the future. Now, let's fast forward to today. If we fast forward to today, there's a lot of things that have changed inside the cab. The 2020 looks different than it did 10 years ago, and FieldView has grown up and matured and does things, like I said, way beyond what we ever thought possible. But actually, the biggest change in the cab is behind the curtain. The biggest change in the cab is how much cargo is now moving from your implement through the iPad and into the cloud. In many instances, it's 10, 15, or 20 times bigger than it was 10 years ago. Where did it come from? Well, it came from all those products that we've been launching for the last 10 years coming out of the 10-10 program. And so what we have seen over the last couple years, that there are some instances where this bridge is screaming. She's creaking, she's groaning under the weight of all of that information. And so what we have been working on is a project in conjunction with FieldView that is going to release a modern bridge. And I don't want to give the impression for a moment that we have sat idly by over the last 3 years as this bridge has started screaming. The FieldView team and the 2020 team has been spending time bracing, reinforcing, adding structure to this bridge as more and more and more cargo comes across it. So as I said, we've been working together, and we're going to talk about today a new modern bridge between FieldView and the 2020. As I said, the other thing that has changed in the industry over the last 10 years is how many places you have the opportunity to work with to store your information. Now, as you know, for the last decade, the only place that the 2020 was able to move its information to automatically was into FieldView. And I want everyone to hear me. We remain committed to the partnership with FieldView. The 2020 and FieldView is an experience that we are passionate about and will continue to be passionate about into the future. But what we have heard from you is that you want to see your 2020 information in other places in the industry, with other partners in the industry, paired up with the rest of the information on your farm. And so was also part of the project that we're going to be announcing, we are opening up the 2020 so that it can interact with the other platforms in the industry. Now, over the last 6 months, as we've been preparing for this day, we have reached out to each one of the platforms in the industry. And we've said to them, hey, we're going to do this at Winter Conference. Our desire is to give our growers the ability to have their 2020 information in any platform in the industry. You guys are a platform in the industry, so we'd love to work together. Because you got to remember, right, in order to build a bridge, somebody on both sides of the river has to agree that that's a good idea, right? And as you can expect, a number of those conversations go exceedingly well, right? We think about Fendt. Every Fendt planter that has ever been built has had precision planting technology on it and has been run by a 2020. The Fendt 1 guys are super excited about this project. We think about Case with Case AFS Connect. We have been technology partners with Case for 8 years. They are very excited about this project. Now, there's others in the industry that maybe don't have as much history with us. Maybe don't have as much background with us. And they're busy guys. There's a lot going on, a lot of priorities. And so as we had those conversations, they said, that's interesting. We'll have to see. And so what I figured I would do, since it's just us, I would ask you guys a little homework assignment. If there's a place that you store your information, and you want your 2020 information to be with the rest of the info on your farm, reach out to them. Share with them how important it is for your 2020 information to be with the rest of the information on the farm. It will help with the prioritization conversation, I would guess. And I was even thinking as I was driving in this morning, you can talk to them at a farm show, you could call them, you could send them a letter, you could send out a tweet. I don't know exactly what that means, but you could send one out. And as I was thinking about birds, I actually have some carrier pigeons left over from the Field Sense project that if you want to borrow one, I can get one for you. It's not that long of a flight to get there from here. So I want to announce today, I'm humbled to announce the product that we are calling Panorama. Panorama, as I said, is a project that has been focused on modernizing how the 2020 interacts with the rest of the world. And it does that through the bringing of a new bridge between the 2020 and FieldView and the opportunity to use your 2020 information with your partner of choice for where you keep your farm data. Now, why did we choose the name Panorama? It doesn't exactly roll off the tongue as maybe you're thinking. The reason we chose Panorama is the definition of panorama is an unobstructed view of one's environment. And that is our passion for you. Our passion for you is that you would have an unobstructed view of your farm data. And most importantly, an unobstructed view of your farm data from where you are today. Most people in the industry, if they have launched a cloud product, they've said, hey, we want you to have an unobstructed view. Just bring all your data to us. And we'll help you have an unobstructed view, and we might even charge you a few $100,000 for it. That's not our passion. Our passion is that you would have visibility to your 2020 data with the partner that you have today so that you can have an unobstructed view of your information. Our passion is to make the 2020 data the most portable data in the entire industry. So we've worked on these two things for the last couple years. It's something that we're really excited to talk about today. But there's also one more thing that we've been working on. This whole thing has to have a face. If we just stopped here, it's like Justin's talking about bridges and arrows and what is going on? And so what we've also worked on and are announcing today is the Panorama app. The goal of the Panorama app is to be a simple phone app designed so that you can view, share, summarize, and analyze your 2020 information. Now, this is the point in the presentation usually when the presenter pulls out his phone and starts talking about all these features. And we put up on the screen a picture of the app, and I beep and bop and boop through the features. I make up a story about Aunt Ida's back 40, and we talk about all the things it can do. And I've watched a lot of these presentations over my career, and every one of them has been boring. So we're not doing that today. We're not going to do that today at all. What we're going to do today is we're going to put the Panorama app to work. We designed the Panorama app so that you can tell your story with your 2020 information. Whether you're telling the story in the farm shop, at the coffee shop, with the landlady, or with the agronomist. We want you to be able to share your year, share your practices with others. And so that's what we're going to do today. As you, throughout the breakout, see Aaron and Corey talk about our agronomic research, you're going to see how they use the Panorama app. As you sit in this room with Jason, as he talks about Symphony Targeted Spray, you're going to see how he used the Panorama app. Our desire is, as I said, for that product to be used to tell your story, and so today we're going to use it to tell our story. I wanted to put a slide together that tried to summarize everything that we talked about here. There's a lot of arrows going in different directions. I want to make sure we all get on the same page. As I said, there's two paths out of the 2020 into field view. There's a live path. There's nothing changing today on that. Nothing we're talking about today changes the live path. That continues to stay the same. That bridge has held and continues to hold. But we are releasing a new path from 2020 into field view. Now, we're not closing the 2012 bridge. But we do expect that over time, more and more traffic will find its way and will find a faster path into field view through the 2023 Panorama Bridge. We also talked about moving your information to other partners in the industry. And we, as I said, are working with multiple people in the industry to get that going. As we beta test this year, we will be beta testing Panorama in this spring in the US and Canada. And then finally, I talked about the Panorama app, designed for you to tell your story on your operation. You know, I spent some time on this slide, and as I got done, I stepped back and I said, man, this is a nerd slide. You know, I'm an engineer, and I do everything I can to not make nerd slides at Winter Conference, and this one snuck through. And I apologize. I apologize for that. Nobody wants to think about bridges. As you drove in here today, how many of you thought about how old the bridge was that you drove across and whether it has cracks or not? That's a creepy thing. You shouldn't be doing that. Bridges that are designed for their purpose, you don't think about them. Bridges that do their job help you get to your destination. And that's our goal. Our goal is that where you want to use your 2020 information, anywhere in the industry, the bridges are there that you don't have to think about them. The information is where it needs to be to get you to your destination. Whether it's with the 2020 and field view in the cab, in those precious hours during the season, or whether it's out of the cab with field view or any of the other apps in the industry, or with the Panorama app. Start back where we started, finish where we started. Our passion is not technology. Our passion is your profitability. There are many projects that we've worked on in the past and will work on in the future that aren't going to work. They're going to fail. They're not going to make it to the middle of this chart. Our goal is to get to the center of that chart. And there's projects, like I said, that don't hit it out of the gate. There's other projects that we launch them, and when we launch them, man, they hit the center. But as the industry changes, as your operation changes, it slides off the target. And so we need to have the guile, we need to have the wherewithal, we need to have the humility to come back to that project and work on it, to change its reality, to bring it back to the center of the target. I thank you for your time, I thank you for your attention, and I sincerely thank you for your partnership. Taryn's going to come up and join us as she shares the logistics of the rest of the day. Thank you.
Thanks, Justin. Good morning and welcome to Winter Conference. My name is Taryn Johnson. I am the events manager here at Precision Planting, and I speak for the entire Precision Planting team when I say thank you for joining us. We are really excited to have you here. We are joined today by farmers from 22 different locations throughout the United States and Canada, and we are honored that you chose to spend your day with us. Before we kick off the rest of the day, I have a few housekeeping items to go over. No matter which of the 22 locations you are joining us from, we have two groups of people that I want to introduce to you. First is our dealers. At each location, we have our premier dealers who are here to answer your questions and enjoy helping farmers like you perform at their best. Next, I'd like to introduce our Precision Planting employee team. These are the folks wearing the green quarter zips. Our entire team is involved in making this a first-class event, so let us know if we can help you in any way. Next, throughout the sessions, should you have any questions in regards to any content you hear or anything product-related, you can text Precision to the number on the screen. It's also noted on your connection card in the front of your notebook, and you can start chatting with an employee. If you are a certified crop advisor, this event is credited for 6 CCA credits. Be sure to sign up at the sheets located near the entrance. The first session was great, but we're just getting started. We have 5 more sessions planned for you today. You'll hear more from our sprayer team on the projects they've been working on, how to get your planter to perform at its maximum potential, learn from our agronomy team on the lessons we've learned from the field this year, and learn why we believe emergence really does matter. And be sure to stick around to the end of the day as we have a parting gift for you. At your remote locations, I'm going to turn it over to your local host to welcome you and go over the logistics for your venue.